Welcome to Rosie the Reviewer. We're your hosts. I'm Sam.
And I'm Marcia.
And we like World War II media, and we want to talk about it.
Buongiorno.
Welcome back to Rosie the Reviewer. This week we're talking about Inglourious Basterds, which came out in 2009. It was directed and written by Quentin Tarantino, and it was his highest grossing film up to that point. I believe it got exceeded by Django Unchained a little while later. It was nominated for 8 Academy Awards and won one, which was Best Supporting Actor for Christoph Waltz, which is probably a surprise to nobody who watched it. And it's an alternate history of the Second World War in which Hitler is assassinated in 1944 by a group of commandos and a Jewish cinema owner. What did you think of this movie?
I was kind of surprised by this movie because I was ready to not like it. So I had low expectations, not in the sense that it was going to be a bad movie, but that it wasn't going to be my cup of tea, but I actually really enjoyed it. The acting is pretty amazing, and especially by Christoph Waltz, as you've just mentioned. There's some interesting characters in this, some female characters in this as well, which I like. The music's interesting, the tension building specifically in this movie is amazing. There's a couple moments where you're just completely waiting for something to happen, and I think that's really hard to do, so I thought that was kind of cool. And it made me think about whether or not I like alternative history. And I'll tell you at the very end of this episode whether I do or not. How about you?
Yeah, I think I saw this in the cinema when it came out, and it's very visually shocking. The sound mixing and the music is really effective. It's quite violent, obviously. It's kind of Tarantino's magnum opus, really. He spent a long time writing this, from what I've read. And the first scene in the movie, which we'll talk about in a little while, is supposedly his favorite thing he's ever written. And it's a very Tarantino-esque movie. It's kind of a spaghetti western set during World War II, super violent. There's always something cathartic and fun about watching Nazis get brutally murdered. So it's kind of a fun ride of a movie. Obviously an alternate history, so not even aiming at being historically accurate in any way, but a fun watch, I would say. I've seen it a couple of times. I always enjoy myself.
So this was my first time watching it. I've only seen 2 other three actually, Quentin Tarantino movies. I've seen Kill Bill. I've seen the most famous one, what's it called?
Pulp Fiction?
Thank you. And I've seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And that's all I've seen by him. It's not usually something I go for, but I kind of like, in this movie, he kind of takes, especially the Nazi stereotype, and just kind of flips it on its head a little bit, like to the extreme, but in a really effective, terrifying way, and I really like it. So I'm excited to talk about it, actually. So yay.
Yeah, supposedly he started working on this before he wrote Kill Bill. And originally the main female character in this movie, Shoshana, was supposed to be a sort of Jewish serial killer, but like a serial killer of Nazis. And every time she killed one, she would scratch them off her list. And then he wrote Kill Bill and kind of used that concept. So he had to rework the character of Shoshana in this movie. But it's interesting to think about how all of his Tarantino canon bits and pieces fit together in his mind.
Yeah, I don't know if this has put me on to wanting to watch more Quentin Tarantino. I don't think so, but if he ever does another World War II movie, I'll watch it, I think.
He definitely has a really specific style. You either like him or you don't.
Yeah, and I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. I like him, but only in like small doses, like not all the time.
That's fair. Yeah. And I know you said you weren't going to make this joke, but it's about time that we watched Inglourious Basterds, because when we tried to watch Fury, this was the movie you kept getting it confused with because it also stars Brad Pitt doing some kind of accent.
I mean, that's the only comparison to make, really. Brad Pitt is the only common demeanor of those 2 movies. Although I guess maybe the violence is in both movies. So I guess I'm kind of excused from being really stupid just on this one occasion. But I also didn't realize that Inglourious was spelled wrong for the longest of times. So maybe I am a bit stupid.
Yeah, well, it's both words, if anyone hasn't seen it written down, both words in the title are spelled incorrectly. The title itself is taken from a movie that came out in 1978. I think it's an Italian movie, but the plot doesn't really have anything to do with this movie. I think Tarantino just liked the title.
Imagine, just be like, that's a cool title, let's use it.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So let's get into the plot. We open with, as you said before, Quentin Tarantino's favorite scene he's ever made. But we open kind of with an old-fashioned movie opening. We just see a bunch of like actors and directors and all that sort of shit with no images on the screen. And then we open with the first scene.
Yeah, the credits go by at the beginning, which is kind of novel in a modern movie.
Yes, and also he does something in this movie to structure it. He kind of has chapters of this movie, which I thought was an interesting way in kind of guiding you along the story. So a bit of a strange opening, but also reminiscent, I guess, of spaghetti westerns is what he's trying to kind of emulate, I think, with this.
Yeah.
It's quite fun. The music's fun too. But then once that's done, we open on a French farm in 1931, where we meet French farmer Perrier Lapedite and his 3 daughters as they ready themselves for the arrival of a very notorious SS Colonel Hans Landa, played by Christoph Waltz. This is the role he received an Oscar for, and his men. This scene is interesting to me because it takes a very long time for him to arrive. You see him in the distance, and then it's like a good 30 seconds before he's there. So it's like, what's this guy gonna do? So when he does arrive, he gets invited reluctantly into the house, where we find out that the Lapedites are hiding a Jewish family underneath the floorboards. And Landa has this conversation that you instantly know that he knows, but he just stretches it out so long. It's just very tense. He sets it up as a little bit of he kind of pretends that they're leaving, and then he shoots everybody underneath the floorboards, at least almost everybody. But one of the girls is hiding, is called Shoshana, played by Melanie Laurent. She manages to flee to safety. I feel like he almost lets her go.
Yeah, he gets a really gross, morbid thrill out of the chase, I think.
Yeah. He's called the Jew killer, is what they call him, right? Or the Jew hunter.
The Jew hunter, and he talks about that's his nickname and he earned it. And then that comes up later in the movie, where then he talks about how, well, who can control who gives them a nickname, et cetera, et cetera. Like it pops back up again.
Mm-hmm. And also what they do in this first scene is drink milk.
They do drink milk. It's plot relevant milk. That's why it had to be mentioned.
But how long is the scene? It's so tense.
It's really long. I was writing the notes for this, and as I've said, I've seen the movie before, so I just sort of jotted out some of the bullet points that I knew, and all of this scene was one bullet point, because I was like, yeah, he comes to the farm, he shoots everyone under the floorboards, the girl escapes, and then the scene goes on for ages, and I was like, Jesus Christ, this is such a long, tense scene. I mean, it's great, but it's very tense.
I wonder, though, it must be so hard to act this scene, also for Denis Ménochet, who plays the farmer, because he ultimately has to make a choice. Obviously, he's hiding these people underneath his floorboards, but also he's got his daughters, and he has to make a choice whether to give up the Jewish family or give up his own family, and he ultimately saves his own family. So it's pretty tough scene to watch.
Yeah, for sure. And you really get a sense of Landa as this guy who just likes to fuck with people. He shows up and he's having this entire conversation in English. And he's like, hey, so are there people hiding under the floorboards? I assume they don't speak English because I don't hear any noise under there. And then he's like, now I'm going to switch back to French and we're going to act like everything is fine and blah, blah, blah. It's so very super villain-esque. He makes it as terrible as possible.
Yeah, and he also pretends to be reasonable, which he's not. But he makes himself sound like he's just this honest guy when he's just a Nazi.
Yeah, he's definitely a cartoonishly evil Nazi, for sure. Mm-hmm. Right, so we skip forward a couple of years to 1944. American Lieutenant Aldo Raine, played by Brad Pitt, doing just a glorious Southern accent of some kind, recruits Jewish American soldiers to join his Nazi-killing commando unit. He does this little monologue that was pretty much the entirety of the first trailer that came out for this movie, I think. I remember this super vividly, where he's explaining to them that they're going to be killing Nazis, and he says, each and every man under my command owes me 100 Nazi scalps, and I want my scalps.
This accent is just hilariously funny to me. He's probably the most comical of all the characters in this movie. He's kind of ridiculous.
You can tell he's having a great time.
Yes, it seems like a dream role to be able to play just this over-the-top, very masculine in a really silly way character.
Right. And we don't know anything about this guy, really. He doesn't have a character background. He's just a sort of archetypal red-blooded American man who wants to brutally kill Nazis. And he's having a good time, and we're having a good time.
Sometimes I forget why Brad Pitt was a big actor, and then he does roles like this, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is why. Because he's really quite suited for this kind of role, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the Inglourious Basterds victims is with Adolf Hitler, played by Martin Wuttke, and he's been ambushed by the bastards, but he's the only one of his little group of soldiers to survive. So he explains what has happened to him, and we get introduced via his storytelling, basically, to Hugo Stiglitz, played by Til Schweiger, and Donnie the Bear Jew Donovich, played by Eli Roth. And these characters are ridiculous and funny, too.
Yeah, Hugo Stiglitz is the guy who was a German soldier and then went crazy and killed a bunch of members of the Gestapo, I think. And Donnie the Bear Jew Donowitz is the one that you saw in all the movie posters who was carrying the baseball bat and was doing a lot of Nazi murdering.
Yeah, I would not want to run into any of these guys in the dark. They're kind of terrifying, but also they're having a good time, so it's really strange. Like, they're scary, but they're laughing about it. So, is this also where we see the Bear Jew exit the cave with the really ominous music?
Yes, it's very good.
I would be terrified if I was a German.
One of the things I liked about Eli Roth's performance is that his character is supposed to be this big bruiser, but he's the one who has the most obvious emotional reaction to killing Nazis, if that makes sense. You can tell that he feels very deeply what's been happening with the Holocaust, and the revenge is very personal to him. And I feel like you get that sense when pretty much every time you see him actually killing Nazis. So I did enjoy that you did get that sense from his performance.
Did you read the trivia about his baseball bat, about the names on it?
No.
One of them is Anne Frank. So he's taking his revenge for all the murdered Jews.
Yeah, hilariously, I don't think Anne Frank was dead yet when
this
was happening, but,
alternative history after all, so.
Yeah, they were like, let's kill Anne Frank off earlier so we can put her on the baseball bat.
Yeah.
Grim. Anyway, so Shoshana, who survived the massacre in the first scene, she now runs a cinema under an assumed name in Paris. And she's out there one night working on the marquee, and a famous German sniper named Frederick Zoller, played by Daniel Bruhl, shows an interest in her. He kind of gets flirty, and she obviously has no interest in return. And the next day, Gestapo officer Dieter Hellstrom, played by August Diehl, picks her up and takes her to see Joseph Goebbels, played by Sylvester Groth, who wants to set up a special screening of Zoller's movie in her theater. So Zoller, being this famous sniper, he supposedly killed 300 guys from a bell tower one day. Goebbels is making a propaganda movie about him where he plays himself. And so Zoller's like, I'm going to do this girl I'm sweet on a favor and get this screening to happen at her cinema. So they're all having this little lunch together. Sylvester Groth, who plays Goebbels, is great. I don't know what it is about his performance, but he puts the hair on the back of your neck on end, but he's also very vain and petty and just a gross person on a regular level as well, not just as on a Nazi level. And they're all sitting there in this restaurant, and then Landa turns up, and he and Shoshana recognize each other. And this is where the glass of milk turns up again, because Landa sits down to chat with her and orders her a glass of milk. He's like, I know who you are, and I'm not going to say anything out loud, but I want you to know that I know.
Yeah, for the longest time in this scene, I don't know if I wasn't paying attention, but I didn't realize it was Shoshana for a bit until that scene with the milk happened. I was like, oh, wait a second. Oh, fuck. I'm not sure if you're supposed to be really surprised by that or not. Obviously, you'd seen it already a couple times. I don't know if you can remember the first time you watched it, if you figured it out right away.
I don't remember.
No, I bet. I do like the fact that we get Goebbels in this movie, and we get to see propaganda within a propaganda movie in a way. Like, it's so interesting to have an actual propaganda movie within a movie.
Yeah.
Quite good.
Yeah.
So Shoshana and her boyfriend and projectionist Marcel, played by Jackie Ido, had to plot to burn down the cinema when all the Nazis come for the premiere of the movie. At the same time, General Ed Fennec, played by Mike Myers, who I did not recognize at all, I didn't see it. Police Lieutenant Archie Hickox, played by Michael Fassbender, on a mission he will undertake to assist the bastards in infiltrating the movie premiere for an attack of their own. So there's two parties now plotting to kill all the Nazis.
Yeah, and every famous person ever is in this movie.
True. I just did not recognize Mike Myers. I knew he was in it, but even then I did not recognize him.
He's definitely doing a very upper crust British accent as well.
I did like Michael Fassbender in this. It's just so interesting to have so many different stereotypes of all these different kinds of characters in one movie. It only works in a kind of over-the-top way. If you do it in a serious way, it'll just fall apart, I think. So it's quite fun.
For sure. Everyone has to commit to the tongue-in-cheek campiness or it doesn't work. Yeah, so Rain Stiglitz and Corporal Wilhelm Mickey, played by Gideon Burkhardt, make contact with a double agent, famous actress Bridget von Hammersmark, played by Diane Kruger. They meet her in this basement bar and she's playing a game with a bunch of German soldiers that she's just met. And it's this game where you write a famous person on a card and then you pass it to the person next to you and they have to put the card on their forehead and then they have to try and guess who they have on their forehead. And as the other people come in to meet her, the card that they're trying to guess is Karl May, who was this writer from the 19th century who wrote a bunch of quote unquote cowboys and Indians books that were supposedly based on his own stories, but he had never actually been to the US and it was all completely nonsense. But I just loved it. It was a little Karl May reference because Germans, Hitler really loved Karl May. Germans are big Karl May fans. So, and unfortunately, the group of them, the Bastards and Bridget von Hammersmark, are sitting around talking about their plan. But Hellstrom, who was the one who picked up Shoshana in the previous scene, so we met him before, he happens to be in the bar and he detects Hickox's strange accent. He's like, that's weird, German. Where are you from? And he's kind of picking at him and trying to figure him out. And eventually their cover is totally blown.
And their cover is blown kind of interestingly, specifically by the way he counts to the number 3, because Germans do it differently to other Europeans and to Americans or to Englishmen, I believe, because he's English, but he's supposed to be German, so he does it the wrong way, and that's what tips him off. And I love stuff like that, because we saw some of that in Masters of the Air as well. And the Karl May reference, we've seen it before. I want to say her last funny World War II movie. I'm just blanking on the name, the Taika Waititi one.
Yeah, Jojo Rabbit.
Yeah, so there's one of those as well. So it's so funny. But obviously this is an older movie, so Quentin Tarantino was first to do it. And probably not the only one, I'm guessing.
Yeah, dubious friend of the pod, Karl May.
Yeah, so when their cover is blown, chaos ensues because everybody except von Hammersmark and Master Sergeant Wilhelm, played by Alexander Failing, are brutally shot and murdered. And he was just there celebrating the birth of his son, Max. It was just a little fun night out for him. But so he survives.
He's standing behind the bar and he's trying to negotiate with Brad Pitt. And then as soon as he's distracted, Hammersmark shoots him.
In the end, almost everybody dies. Von Hammersmark is wounded. So Rain is a bit suspicious that she was the one who set the whole thing up, because he thought it was suspicious to begin with to be meeting them in the basement. There's a whole little fun bit of dialogue about the basement. And she's shot, but they kind of patch her up and they give her a cast. And altogether, they develop a new plan where Rain Donovich and Umar Ulmer, played by Omar Doom, will play Italian film industry type to get into the premiere. And I think everybody listening will have seen this scene, regardless of whether they've seen this movie or not. But They also have just learned that Adolf Hitler will be attending the premiere, so if they succeed, they'll just have killed all the Nazis all at once.
Yeah, you can't have a movie where they're going to assassinate Nazis without having them kill the main Nazi. So stakes are high.
The end boss.
Yeah, it's unfortunate for them because their initial plan relied pretty heavily on all of their German-speaking dudes being able to get into the premiere, and then they sent all of their German-speaking dudes into the meeting with von Hammersmark, and they all got killed. So there's a little bit where they're talking about Brad Pitt's like, all right, we'll go in order of who speaks the most Italian. He's like, me, and then you, and then you. And Omar's like, well, I don't speak any Italian. He's like, exactly. So you speak the third best Italian.
And funnily enough, in the scene that follows, it's the exact other way around in terms of pronunciation. It's really funny. This is the absolute funniest scene in the entire movie.
Yeah. So they're at the premiere. They're in their nice tuxes. Landa is obviously immediately onto them. Nothing gets by him. Brad Pitt says buongiorno in the worst Italian accent you've ever heard in your life. And Landa is fucking with them all. He's getting them to repeat their names back to them.
Gorlami.
He speaks Italian. This is Christoph Waltz cycling through 4 languages in like 5 minutes in this scene, and he's crushing in all of them. Like it's great. It's a great scene. But again, super tense because it's supposed to be this upbeat, cheery conversation, and it's funny, but you also know that shit is not going to go well for them. And he gets von Hammersmark alone. She's been saying, because she was shot, of course, the previous day, she's been saying that she was in a skiing accident. He knows that this is not the case because he found her shoe at the scene of the shootout in the bar. And so he kills her with his bare hands. It's extremely violent.
It's really funny, by the way, that Diane Kruger, I read that when Quentin Tarantino met her, he thought she was American and he had no idea she was actually German. So It's really quite funny. But yeah, I liked her character. I kind of thought she was gonna live, but she dies probably one of the most gruesome ways of the entire movie.
Yeah, Landa, who is always acting like he's a charming, gentlemanly sort, even though behind closed doors we know that he's a monster. And then this is really the first time we see him get his hands dirty. He's on top of her, choking the life out of her. It's very brutal, and you see who he really is.
Yeah.
And he also has Rain arrested, as well as another bastard, Smithson Little Man Yudovich, played by BJ Novak from The Office. But luckily, for those of us who want to see Hitler get murdered, Shoshana and Marcel's plan to burn down the cinema is still set to go ahead towards the end of the film. If you'll remember, the film that they're watching is the propaganda movie about the sniper where he plays himself. And apparently Eli Roth, who plays Donovich, he actually directed the film within a film, which is called Nation's Pride. And they used 300 extras, supposedly.
Yeah, I also read about this film that they were only supposed to shoot for a day, but Quentin Tarantino liked it so much that he gave them 2 extra days to film more footage. And the actual film is 5.5 minutes long, so they've shot like a little short. It's so funny too. I don't know, it's quite a clever movie in a way.
Yeah,
it's on the nose, but in a really I think you have to be a little smart to get all the irony of this movie.
For sure, yeah.
So, Landa makes Rainy Yudovich an offer. He will allow their plan to go ahead in exchange for amnesty from the Allies. So he kind of senses that his time is up and he's like, shit, gotta save myself. So it turns out he's even planted dynamite of his own under Hitler's chair. And meanwhile, Donovich and Ulmer, still in a theater, attempt to get closer to Hitler and Goebbels. There's a lot going on in this movie. I think I missed the part where he had dynamite under Hitler's chair. I didn't even notice.
Yeah, he kicks it under there with his foot. He's always 2 steps ahead, this guy.
Wow. I feel like this guy, actually, Landa, is kind of the main character of this movie in a way.
Yeah, he's definitely ties all the plot lines together, I suppose.
Yeah.
Zoller nearly ruins everything for Shoshana by going to speak with her just as the plan is about to unfold. So basically what her and Marcel were planning was during the last film reel, there's going to be a little movie that her and Marcel filmed that's going to get cut in. And it's her being like, guess what? I'm going to kill all y'all. You're all going to die in a fire. And you'll all have to know that a Jewish person killed you. And it's almost time for the 4th reel to go on. The plan's almost going to happen. And then Zoller shows up and he's like, hey, just wanted to chat. Just wanted to get your number or whatever. And she rejects him again, and he reacts super badly. So she's like, well, I can't, like, I don't have time to deal with this. So she just shoots him. And the sound of the gun is disguised by the film, because, of course, in the movie, it's a guy sniping like 300 people from a bell tower. So gunfire is not out of place. And unfortunately, he's not quite dead yet. So she goes over to check on him, and he shoots her a bunch of times.
And she dies. I was kind of sad about this, to be honest. I wanted her to be able to see her revenge, because she does get it, because in the next scene, Marcel has already set the theater ablaze by just lighting a bunch of, like, a film roll on fire. Like, apparently it's extremely flammable. And meanwhile, Donowitsch and Ulmer kill the guards outside of Hitler's balcony. So everything is happening all at once. The theater is on fire, people are screaming, and who machine guns who? I did pay attention, I did really like it, but so much happens at the same time that it sometimes gets a little bit confusing. So Donowitsch and Ulmer machine gun Hitler, they have the honors of killing him, and then they kind of stand on the balcony of the burning theater and shoot everybody else down below. It's really violent.
It is super violent. And this is another moment where you just see from Donowitsch's face that he's having almost a spiritual experience by killing these Nazis, and it's super personal for him.
Yeah, really quite good.
Yeah. One of I think the top letterboxed review for this movie, because sometimes I look at them just out of curiosity, the top one was, I wouldn't invite Hitler to my movie premiere. Seems like a bad dude. And I'm like, yeah. Also, if you invite Hitler to your movie premiere, the entire theater burns down and some guys will bust in and machine gun everyone. So
it's also like, it's a very small theater, so it's very confined. It doesn't seem all that smart of the Nazis to do that, to be in a tiny theater. And it wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for our little movie star who just wanted to get a girlfriend and failed, but then also had to kill her. I don't like it.
Yeah, he sucked, but he's dead, so it's fine.
But so does Shoshana. She kind of deserved to live.
But in a way, she did get to live on, because even after she's died, this film plays where she's basically telling all these Nazis that she is their comeuppance, and Hitler and Goebbels and everyone that matters to the Third Reich is killed because of her, really. So she does get a legacy that lives on. World War II ends a few months early.
True. That's very true. Shoshana lives.
Rain takes Landa to the American lines because he's cut this deal where he's going to get all these sweet privileges from the Allies in exchange for allowing this plot to assassinate Hitler to go ahead. And Landa surrenders to him. Clearly, he's just like the cat that got the canary. He's so pleased and smug. And Rain kills Landa's sidekick. And for the first time, you see Landa's self-satisfied mask slip. This is not according to his plan. And Rain turns to him. And as we've seen earlier in the movie, the custom with all of his Nazi prisoners is to carve a swastika into their forehead, because he says, I assume you're going to take off that Nazi uniform at some point. I'm going to give you a little something you can't take off. And the movie ends with him scraping a swastika into Landa's forehead.
It's disgusting, but also sweet, sweet vengeance.
Yeah, it's great. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not a super long movie. When it ends, you're kind of like, wait a second, is the war over? And you realize, yes, it is, because everybody's dead.
Yeah, everyone is dead, but the war is over, so there is that.
Yeah, and I like this ending. It's almost a bit anticlimactic to end on that note, but it's also very symbolic, so I kind of do like it. I don't know how else they would have ended it, to be fair, because it's so far away from reality at this point that what else are you going to do?
Yeah, I did like that. What happened with so many Nazis after the war was that beyond the big famous Nuremberg trials, there were just quite a lot of people who slipped away back into ordinary lives, or the Werner von Brauns of the world who got collected and sent to work in the United States as beneficiaries of the Cold War, if you want to call it. And we think that's going to happen with Landa. And at the last minute, it's like, no. Actually, call back to something that happened earlier in the movie. Everyone's going to know this guy's a Nazi forever. And that's, of course, not what happened in real life, but it's kind of cathartic for it to happen to this one super cartoonishly evil Nazi.
Like uber Nazi.
Yes.
In a way. It's good. I do like it. And I also like that he doesn't kill him. that he just lets him live with the shame of being a Nazi after they've lost. So yeah, he was so convinced he was going to walk away from all that. Guess what? Nope.
Yeah.
So we do have some notes for this movie, not that many because we can't really compare it to real history because it's not based specifically on anything. We've got a couple of different kind of notes, like Samuel L. Jackson being the narrator of the movie is one of them. I feel like he's such a staple in Quentin Tarantino movies.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember specifically, I had forgotten that he was in this movie because obviously you don't see him. And then specifically in the scene where they're explaining how flammable film roll is, I was like, oh yeah, that's Samuel L. Jackson. I recognize that voice.
Yeah, I didn't know. I had to find out through your notes. So thanks.
There were some real life groups that were kind of similar to the Bastards. There was a Jewish infantry brigade group, which was an all Jewish unit within the British military. And after the war, some members formed vigilante groups, which assassinated hundreds of Axis war criminals. And there was also a special interrogation group, which was also a British Army unit. This one was comprised mainly of German-speaking Jews who could infiltrate and sabotage German operations during the North African campaign.
Yeah, imagine. This must also have been so dangerous, right? Being like this middle of the books group of people, just with no support from anyone, just doing your own thing and doing what's right, or at least getting vengeance. Like, it's not easy.
Yeah, I guess you'd be real fucking motivated.
Yep. Yeah, I wish there was more like information on groups like this. There's a couple of stories that you can go and look up on the internet, but it's not super elaborate or anything. I do wonder if they're ever gonna make a real movie and not funny movie about a group like this. Who knows? So I said I was gonna get back to you on whether or not I like alternative history, and I don't think I've seen many World War II movies yet that have an alternate version of historical events. I think the only one I can think of that I've seen a little bit of is The Man in the High Castle, which is kind of the world as it would be if Germany had won the war and Japan had won the war. So I don't know if I like it as a genre. I think it only works in this sort of context where it's really over the top. Like Tarantino gets away with it because it's so crazy. The second it becomes really serious, I get a bit irky about alternate history. I wonder how you feel about it.
I think it's an interesting thought exercise. And I mean, I think if you're using it as a method of exploring certain themes in fiction and stuff, I mean, it's just for like The Man in the High Castle, for example, it relies on us all agreeing on a certain series of assumptions about what would have happened. And then kind of going from there and being like, all right, well, what would the world look like if this were the case? You know, how would things have progressed over the last however many decades? So I do think that can be super interesting. I never super got into it. My dad used to read a lot of these alternate history books, the Harry Turtledove ones. But yeah, no, I never super got into it, which is not to say that I'm not interested, but I'm just so into historical nonfiction and reading things that actually happened. And I feel like I'll never get to the bottom of my actual historical nonfiction pile. So I just don't have a lot of time for, well, what if, you know?
I never thought I would ever agree with just the statement of never running out of nonfiction books to read, but I have like a 15 on my pile, so I completely agree with you. There's so much to learn still and so much to read about. So I also tend to stick to the actual history so far. But it's interesting in this movie. It does work really well.
Yeah, and it's really fun to imagine Hitler having gotten assassinated, you know?
Yes, that's very true. And also, I think we should remember that Tarantino in no way was trying to make these characters like their actual counterparts in history. Like, he doesn't really try to make Goebbels the way Goebbels was or Hitler the way Hitler was supposed to be. Like, it's just a character in this movie. And I think that's why it works so well. Like, it's not trying to be super serious. I think the second you become really serious about alternate stuff, then it becomes really kind of strange.
And I think Tarantino is really interested in this theme because he kind of did the same thing in Django, right? Where it was the people who were historically oppressed getting their revenge on the cartoonishly evil oppressors. And so Tarantino seems to really enjoy exploring that theme, and people clearly enjoy watching it. It's a really good time. I don't know what people who, for example, Holocaust survivors think about this kind of thing. Because I mean, I could see both sides, right? I could see people finding it disrespectful, etc. But yeah, I mean, definitely has its place in the movie canon.
Yeah. I was just trying to think of if I could think of anything that I would want to see in like an alternative ending to something, to like a famous battle or something, but I can't off the top of my head think of anything. So let's skip that. Also, the next one I wrote down, I don't know if we can really talk about this that much, but obviously this movie is very violent. And I wonder if this movie would work half as well if it hadn't been this violent. I feel like it's almost, if you make it decent in a way, like if you make it clean, it's not nearly as effective. So I'm trying to remember, are all Tarantino's movies this violent? I think they are, right?
Yeah, it's kind of his hallmark. And I would also say that I think it's pretty central to this movie. I don't think you could take it out and have the movie read the same way.
No, exactly. It kind of makes me uncomfortable a bit, but I think that's also kind of the point.
Yeah. And I mean, the violence is over the top too, right? Like when you're seeing the guy's head get caved in by the baseball bat, the violence itself is kind of larger than life.
Yeah, it's like the Kill Bill slice of the head as well as similarly crazy, and the spurting of blood is very over the top. But I guess it's good if they're Nazis.
Yeah, I think we can all get behind some violent murder when it's Nazis.
Yeah. And I tried to look up something about the music for this episode because the music is almost another character in this movie. He plays with silence versus really funny, inappropriate kind of songs. I wonder how he chooses his music. I couldn't find anything about it, but there's so many songs that are strangely fitting despite being totally inappropriate for the moment. I don't know how he does it.
Yeah, you can really tell that he has an artistic vision, and that definitely includes the music. The bit where the quote-unquote bear Jew is coming out of the cave and that song is playing, and then also the bit where Landa and Shoshana recognize each other, and all of a sudden the music is just super loud and intense. Those were both moments where I was like, man, he's done it again.
Yeah, it's almost like a reflection of someone's thoughts or something, or feelings reflected in this really chaotic music. It's really quite smart. And it definitely would not work with regular film music, I don't think. Like if you would just put a regular score underneath, it wouldn't work. I did like the music quite a bit. I would listen to the soundtrack, I think, just on its own, just because it's so odd and weird.
Yeah.
I wanted to rabbit hole so hard for this movie, but there's not a whole lot to rabbit hole about. So I'm very sorry. I feel like I failed my rabbit holing mission. But they can't all be like super deep movies, I guess.
Yeah, it's true. Well, we do have to rate this movie. We are going to rate it plot relevant glasses of milk out of 10. How many plot relevant glasses of milk out of 10 would you rate this movie?
I would probably give it, I really like milk, so I am gonna give it 8 plot relevant glasses of milk out of 10.
Grazie.
Because it just surpassed all my expectations. I was ready to not like it, and I just really kind of liked it. I think I'll watch it again, actually. So, all around good time for me, despite all the violence. I didn't really mind the violence overall. How about you?
Yeah, I think I would also give it 8 plot relevant glasses of milk out of 10. I've seen it a few times. It's something I can just throw on and you don't have to think that much about. And it's fun. It's always enjoyable watching Nazis get what's coming to them. I think Christoph Waltz is amazing. Like, if you haven't seen this movie, his performance is a work of art. It's so good. And yeah, I mean, I'll probably watch it again. It's not really is it a World War II movie that you need to see if you love World War II? Not sure about that. But as an action movie, it's a good time.
Yep, I agree. But still, there's some, you say you don't really need to watch it as a World War II movie, and I agree. But then it does take the nick out of things like propaganda and like the German propaganda specifically. So there is some thought-provoking stuff in there if you want to look for it. Like you have to make an effort, but it is in there. So it's quite interesting. And we don't really get to see that very much in other movies. So I do quite like that he took that approach.
For sure. And women who weren't hat racks. We like that too.
It's a shame they all had to die.
Yeah, but normally I'd be more upset about all the female characters getting killed, but realistically, almost all of the other characters also got killed, so...
It's equal.
It seems, yeah, it was a bit equal opportunity.
Yeah.
Corretto.
Are you reading anything?
I'm reading this book called Inside Camp X by Lynn Phillip Hodgson. And Camp X was a facility for training secret agents during World War II that was on the North Shore of Lake Ontario here in Canada. And lots of famous spies trained there. It was a huge center for transmitting radio signals across the ocean between the United States and Great Britain and South America and all kinds of places. And there's a show based on it called X Company that we're probably going to cover at some point on the pod. So I've been reading the book to get a little background about it.
Is there anything still left in Ontario for you to go see?
No. So what happened after the war was that the camp got passed on to an army unit of signalers. So they were still using this sort of transmitter throughout the Cold War. And then in 1969, they closed it. Most of the buildings were torn down. There's one or two that still exist that got taken to other locations and they're being used for other things now. But on the actual location itself, there's like a few craters in the ground from where they used to practice explosives. And there's a few like foundations of houses, concrete foundations. And there's a plaque that's been erected, but there's no actual buildings or anything left.
Shame. I would love to have come over and go and see that. There's so little left, guys, of all these amazing places. But yeah, sounds like a good book. Like, I feel like we're kind of just getting into all the spy shit. So much spy shit.
Yeah, I love spy shit.
I'm reading 3 books at the same time, 2 of which I've already talked about. A third one is a Dutch book, so I won't do any talking about that because I've only read 1 chapter and I've got no clue what it's about yet. So I'll tell you next time when I do cover that. All that's left is to say thank you for listening. You can find us wherever you get your podcast and you can rate us 5 stars if you so fancy. We would very much like it if you did. You can follow us on Instagram at Rosie the Reviewer Podcast, or you can send this episode to a friend or your mother or your sister. And what else can you do? You can visit our website, rosieTheReviewer.com.
Amazing. See you next week.
Yeah.
Arrivederci.
See you next week. Bye.